On this week's NFV SDN Reality Check, we look at some of the top headlines from across the space from the past week, including a new partnership between AT&T and Amdocs, and speak with Glue Networks to discuss the use of automation to improve reliability and simplify network deployments. Well, thanks for joining us on this week's NFV SDN Reality Check. I'm your host, Dan Meyer, Editor-in-Chief at RCR Wireless News. For our featured interview this week, we spoke with Jeff Gray, who's the CEO at Glue Networks, to discuss the use of automation in improving reliability and simplifying network deployments. But first, let's take a look at some of the top headlines from across the space over the past week. Well, AT&T signed a deal with Amdocs to be the integrator for telecommunications companies and cloud developers looking to take advantage of AT&T's ECOMP platform in building out software-centric network services. The agreement calls for Amdocs to help companies interested in the ECOMP platform deploy the open source software into their own networks, as well as to help AT&T market the platform globally. Both firms said they would work to bolster the platform through standardization and contributions to the open source community. AT&T recently said it was moving the ECOMP platform to the open source community with plans to work with Linux Foundation on the structure of the open source release. AT&T unveiled the ECOMP initiative earlier this year, which it said was designed to automate network services and infrastructure running in a cloud environment. Also this week, the ONOS project's Cord platform continues to gain momentum with the Open Networking Lab and the Linux Foundation spinning off the Cord initiative as an independent open source project. The Cord initiative was formed in early 2015 with a focus on accelerating the adoption of open source NFV and SDN solutions for service providers using open source platforms like ONOS, OpenStack, Docker, and XOS. The initiative this week also gained new partners with Google, Radisys, and Samsung all joining the program. Google is jumping in with both feet, hosting the first Cord Summit this week at its Tech Corner campus in California. The initiative also includes members AT&T, Verizon, China Unicom, NTT Communications, and SK Telecom, as well as vendors like Ciena, Cisco, Fujitsu, Intel, NEC, and Nokia. Well, for more on the Cord project, please check out a couple of interviews we've done recently on the NFV SDN Reality Check show, where we spoke with Tech Mahindra and Radisys on the topic. Well, as already mentioned, for our featured interview this week, we spoke with Jeff Gray, who's the CEO at Glue Networks, to discuss use of automation to improve reliability and simplify network deployments. We had initially planned to run this conversation earlier this year, but some technical issues forced us to redo the interview, and I want to again thank Jeff for being easy to work with on that issue. Well, let's take a look at that interview now. Well, thanks for joining us this week. This week we are joined by Jeff Gray, who's the CEO of Glue Networks, talking a bit about the wonderful world of virtualization and SDN and all those great acronyms. So, hey, Jeff, thanks for joining us this week. We appreciate it.
No problem, Dan. Pleasure to be here.
Very good. Well, maybe start off with, for those that don't know much about Glue Networks, maybe a little overview of the company, kind of the formation, what was kind of behind your guys getting together and starting this company up.
Sure. Well, let's talk about the problem first, and then love to share our approach and our solution. Today, there are massive amounts of investments pouring into digitization of enterprises, into instrumentation and analytics. However, responding is still a manual effort. And enterprises are digitizing their businesses to allow information to flow more freely. They're installing monitoring solutions to look at what's going right and what's going wrong. And then big data to take potentially millions of alerts and funnel those down to the 10 or 20 that matter. However, when it comes to responding on those alerts, it's still a matter of network engineers going out on a device-by-device basis, taking out their fingers and troubleshooting the network equipment that is currently installed. So what users have told us and have been very, very vocal about is that network complexity continues to rise, service delivery speed and agility continues to drop, IT staff remains flat, and they're really at a deadlock. They need to do something different. There are pockets of automation that have been developed by a variety of vendors looking to automate their own solutions, but users have been extremely vocal that they need a solution that creates a layer of automation across vendor islands and delivers agility to the enterprise. And so Glueware is the first multi-vendor software-defined network orchestration solution that allows enterprises to take control of their networks. And so it simplifies network complexity, not by reducing feature sets or rolling out yet another box, but by allowing a customer to data model and automate what they currently have in their brownfield environments. It reduces cost substantially from the perspective of lifecycle management. We have customers that are saving millions of dollars a year per customer after they've deployed Blueware. And then it boosts network agility because now once the network is modeled, now if they want to make a policy change, regardless of if it's in the data center, the WAN, or the LAN, or any vendor type, mix of vendors or architecture, they can actually make those changes with confidence. So.
Makes sense. And obviously, I know we cover a lot of the telecom operator space here, but it does seem like the enterprise market is really kind of pushing a lot of this move towards virtualization. Like you said, a lot of these guys are pretty well advanced in it, but there are all these issues still popping up with, and obviously automation is a significant part of this because, again, all these things that people are trying to do in these networks, without automation, it just seems to bog the whole process down. So I'm guessing from what you're seeing out there, that is, again, like you said, kind of a major pain point for these guys is being able to simplify what they're doing on their end to make sure that they're getting all their efficiencies that they can out of these deployments, really.
I mean, this is really the next frontier in enterprise networking, and enterprises typically take the lead on more advanced and customized solutions. And the reality of it is they're being forced to turn into what the web scale companies have done, right? Like, so Google and Facebook, they've created their own orchestration, but they've also innovated all the way down to the hardware layer with open compute and other initiatives. And it's really not a fair fight for enterprises that don't have, the resources of these larger web scale companies to do the same. And so our view and what customers have been asking for is that if they could have a packaged solution to be able to bring those capabilities and those benefits to create agility within the enterprise, that would be extremely valuable. But the key thing is that it's not about Glue or any independent software vendor trying to build all of the different iterations themselves, right? What they're looking for is the ability, because they know best, to import their own best practices. And every enterprise is different. Everyone is a snowflake. So the question is, how do you bring automation to something that's different every time? Typically, automation is about doing the same thing over and over again and repeatable. That's easy, right? Automation breaks down in the enterprise where it's different every single time. And that's the big problem that we've been tackling. And that's why it's taken 3 years and a lot of investment to be able to create a solution like this.
It makes sense. Yeah, I guess maybe touch a bit on that because it does seem like the pace of development and deployment of software defined in the enterprise does seem to kind of be hitting a pretty good inflection point now where operators are really enterprises are really looking to do this. But I guess has the pace of the supporting systems behind all of this, have they really kept pace with what enterprises are looking to do, you think, or are we still kind of lagging a bit about what they really want to do out there?
Well, it's really not kept pace. At the lower level in the network stack, there are new solutions that have come out from challenger vendors that are pretty powerful. And so what's happening is enterprises are running proof of concepts and starting to make deployments because there's some better capabilities, but then all of a sudden they have to stop and say, well, what happens in the case of a merger and acquisition? What happens in the case of if I want to roll out some new offices and they have legacy equipment? And so it might feel good or bring some benefits in the short term, but now users across the board are saying, hold on a minute, right? We're actually in the longer term, we're making the problem worse. And so now user groups, some of the most notable like Open Network User Group are saying, look, we need to solve this layer of automation at a higher layer. And as there's more fragmentation that happens at a lower layer, there's more value that goes up to a higher layer in bringing a layer of automation that can automate and create interoperability solutions across vendors and across domains and end-to-end architecture.
Yeah, that's a good point. I mean, because it does seem like, the more companies I talk to and the more industry associations, I've talked to ONUG and I've talked to a lot of the SD-WAN guys and all these other different various groups out there. It seems like, again, the end goal for all of this is simplicity, and automation obviously is part of that. But it just seems like there's so many layers that seem to keep cropping up that people are trying to do. It just seems like, while trying to tackle one side of it with making things simpler, we're adding more and more complexity to it at the same time. Is there any way that one side, I guess the solution side can get on top of the problem side of this? Because it just seems like it's ongoing battle out there that you hope at some point, it gets resolved, but it just seems like it's constantly going.
Well, I think you bring up a wonderful point. I don't know if it's wonderful, but it's
I appreciate that.
Accurate. And once again, this is why it's taken us 3 years to work on this solution and to develop an answer. And that's in the form of the Blueware community that we're now launching. And the reality of it is our customers and enterprises know best. They already have these brownfield implementations working within their enterprise, right? And every single one's different. Every single one has little different tweaks, different parameters. Well, for a software vendor to attempt to canonicalize every single iteration and then code that in software that normalizes that, I mean, it's just impossible. When you talk about solution versus problem, it's just ever running on the treadmill, right? It's just not really, it's not possible. So the way to solve this is opening up a platform and allowing customers to be able to create their own models and be able to validate those. And so we have a rapid development environment called Blueware Lab, which comes as part of the community. We're seeding the community with, there's actually 13 vendors and operating systems that are being launched within Blueware. And then every 3 weeks, we're planning to add yet another operating system, another vendor, and an example. And so what that means is once Blueware can talk two-way to this vendor operating system and understands all the semantics, now we can give that to the community and say, here, you have your best practices. Now go ahead and build a model and import your own. So this is the way to scale. This is the way to bring open networking. And this is a way to allow all the fragmentation at the lower end to actually be a good thing now that enterprises can have a holistic solution and then at a higher layer.
Makes sense. So obviously then the community aspect of this is an important part. I know from speaking with various vendors and analysts on this as well, that there still seems like a bit of a challenge though in terms of vendors working together. I mean, obviously, a lot of guys are competitive with each other, so you don't want to share too much. But it's important, though, for everybody to kind of at least be on the same page in terms of this movement. Well,
we'll have to see what happens, right? The idea that every vendor is going to get together and sing Kumbaya and agree on a standard interface, we don't see, at least in our lifetimes. However, if it's possible to embrace the diversity at a lower end and be able to have a model that creates a consistent layer that then can plug into in enterprise existing systems and workflow and monitoring solutions and things like this, then all of a sudden it becomes manageable. And that's what enterprises have been telling us, our customers, saying, look, go and do this. You've already solved the WAN, go out data center, go out LAN, be able to plug into our systems, and now we can actually embrace this diversity and bring agility to the enterprise. So that's our view. We look, any initiatives where there's more standardization on interfaces, that's a good thing, right? Then we can actually do more. But until that happens with all the vendors, that's really outside of our control, then the next best alternative is to give an enterprise a consistent way to manage all the heterogeneous environments. So that's what we're focused on.
Makes sense. Okay. And I guess at that point, then, is it just a matter of, teaching the enterprises then how to kind of take what you're providing to them and then customize to what they need in those deployments? Is there some sort of interaction there between what you're doing and then the enterprise being able to actually then do what they need?
Yeah, and I think that there's some real secret sauce here as well, Dan. I mean, the rest of the industry is focused on trying to turn network engineers into developers, right? And home grow their own automation, orchestration, and there's industry initiatives like Yang models. I mean, we embrace Yang, right? In fact, the more Yang models that come out, the better it is. It's just that enterprises need a way to be able to consume those models. And so rather than forcing a developer or a network engineer to become a developer, right? What about creating a platform where they can meet in the middle? And we can actually allow network engineers to embrace, the detailed knowledge that they have at a lower layer of how everything works from, what's flowing in the pipes, but then allows developers to come in and be able to stitch this type of solution to their DevOps capabilities and to their application development and workflow capabilities. And so, that's really part of the reason of why we've launched the community and are seeding with examples. And part of the special sauce is that now network engineers and developers can rapidly do this. They don't have to, let's say, build a mansion to go camping, right? They don't have to compile this massive heavyweight system. They can actually make changes, validate on the fly, push into production very quickly. So it's kind of like bringing DevOps to network engineering and really bridging those worlds. And that's why we're so excited about this launch.
And so we are getting to that point then where these guys can do this, because I know when I talk to a lot of, whether it's enterprises or operators or whoever's out there moving down these roads, that is their biggest concern, is kind of the retraining aspect of, they've got these great engineers who, are really good at what they do, but this new movement towards virtualization is, kind of stressing them out a little bit. And but it sounds like then that we are making that progress, then at least in bridging the gap there.
I mean, they can, so to give you a couple examples, we onboarded A10 in less than a day. We onboarded Riverbed in less than 4 days. We onboarded Palo Alto in less than 4 days. It's going very, very quickly. We worked for a long time to build up all the Cisco libraries on SD-WAN and switching, right? But what happened is we had a breakthrough that we launched at the last ONUG, and it's called the Dynamic NDK, Network Development Kit. And essentially, we automated ourselves. We took all the remedial things, everything that we were repeating over and over again, and we carved that out of the system, and now that's automated. And what's happened is this has become lightning fast. And so literally, network engineers can go and code new features in a matter of minutes, right? If it's a major feature set, it's going to take days, right? But if it's a small feature set or change, they can do it in minutes, validate it, test it, push it to production right then and there. And so, that's an example of how an enterprise can be agile. So we just had this come up in a global customer of ours, and all of a sudden there was an 11th hour design change, 6 new features for this Partner Connect network. And we helped the customer do this in less than a day, test it, validate it, and actually they were ahead of schedule by 3 months rather than being delayed massively if we would have had to hard code that. So, this is just the, beginning of what's going to happen, but these types of agile processes and benefits to the business is what we're going to see moving forward.
Hooray for automation, right? There we go. So very good. Yeah, definitely. So I guess maybe another, aspect of this as well is, you talk a lot about the open source community, or at least open standards in terms of the importance of that. And it does seem like that the open community is providing a nice base layer of standards or working together with software there. But it always seems like too, as companies take open source standards, they always tend to kind of add their own, whatever that is that they makes what they're doing special.
Right.
Does that, is that a challenge in the fact that it kind of takes away a bit from the openness of open source? Because again, once people start adding their own little things to them, it makes them a little more tricky. I know we talked a bit about vendors working together. It seems like maybe that's a part of that as well, is trying to make sure that people understand and kind of stick with the open source mantra, I guess.
Well, I'd say that there's 2 kind of layers to open source, at least the way that we're seeing the world. There's open source at the lower end, and lower in the network stack. Things that are going on, like on the controller side, Open Daylight, et cetera. And those are all good things, right? The more that the industry can get together and create, more common architectures, and then sprinkle some of their special sauce on. We see that as a good thing. Now, as soon as they sprinkle their special sauce, right, their proprietary aspect, then all of a sudden, they don't work together, right? So then again, there's a real need for orchestration, because customers want some of this proprietary capability if it solves a point problem. That's why multi-vendor environment has come about in such force, right?
Yeah.
Different price, different value, different business needs, and all of a sudden you have a massively multi-vendor environment. Now, at the orchestration layer, the open source initiatives that are really happening at this point are more service provider focused, right? They're more focused on standards like Yang, as I already mentioned. They're more about building a pretty large system and then pumping it out in high volume. And so what enterprises need is a system that's capable of making tweaks and changes on the fly, a lighter weight system, a more customizable system, if you will. And that is very much blue ocean at this point. And that's really what we're going after. When we look at, Yang, or even what, some of the open source, it's like they can create their schemas, they can create their models, and then they have to go and build it and compile it and create this system and then move forward. And we thought if there's a way to create an iterative approach where they can just rapidly do this and then suck in whatever open source models that the industry is sharing and then consume it, that there'd be a lot of value for the enterprises. So we embrace open source. We love, the capabilities at the lower layer, and we'd love to be part of something at the higher layer. It's just that we did not want to wait for the industry to move to solve this problem, because enterprises want it solved now.
Makes sense. That makes sense, definitely. Well, I guess then maybe looking forward a bit, I guess, what are some of the bigger challenges you see going forward for you guys, and which enterprise customers or what enterprise are having to tackle going forward? What do you see as maybe some of the big challenges over the next 6 to 12 months or so?
Well, I would say it's squarely on the diversity or the fragmentation that's happening at a lower layer. So, every time a new vendor comes in, they create a vendor island. And that can be a good thing within that island, but then, how do you create the bridge across those islands? And I believe that is, for our enterprise customers, I believe that's the biggest challenge moving forward. That's what they're telling us.
Mm-hmm.
However, the ability to solve that problem and not have to do everything at once,
Mm-hmm.
right? The ability to start out in the WAN and then say, look, I want to automate, these 3 data centers, or even, these portions of data centers in the same way, and have a gradual brownfield migration process, and then move in the LAN in the same way. So rather than saying, hey, we need to roll out everywhere, or we need to install software on all these devices, across the board, or a greenfield implementation,
Mm-hmm.
that brownfield is one of the biggest challenges that enterprises are facing. And as they want to roll new devices, whether it's the same vendor and just happens to be a new device, or a new vendor or a new architecture, how do they truly migrate, from current state to future state? And I believe that's one of the biggest challenges and hardest problems in networking, and that's really what we're squarely focused on. And we have a solution for it. I mean, we're proven in global production, and now we're expanding, and it's just, so we're really excited about the future, but there's a lot to work on. So.
Yeah, definitely. And like you said, too, it does seem like there's a new vendor popping up in the community on a daily basis, weekly basis, and always new organizations popping up as well. So yeah, I'm guessing you guys who are down in the trenches there are just having to see more and more work come your way, I'm guessing, at this point. And it's definitely keeping you guys busy, but again, a lot of work. But again, automation, that'll solve it all at some point, hopefully.
Well, we're having a good time.
We'll see.
But just keep our heads down and keep developing. And, it's really about delivering real solutions, right? And when we first thought about this and we first looked at the problems, it's just, we saw, well, this is, there's a lot to solve here.
Yeah.
And, our view is that as long as we keep our heads down and keep developing and keep having real solutions, and then go out and share with the world what we can do, we just want to stay within a reality check. And we have the platform, and it's expanding, and we're just so thrilled that we have our current customers and launching this community with their support. So
that sounds good. Very good. Hey, well, Jeff, definitely appreciate the insight on this today. Obviously, there's a lot happening in the virtualization space. Obviously, enterprises are, like we said earlier, driving a lot of this. So it's good to get some insight there on the topic. So we definitely appreciate the time today on that. So thanks so much.
Thank you.
Well, thanks again for joining us on this week's show, and make sure to check us out again next week when we are scheduled to speak with Jinban to discuss NFV deployment and integration challenges for vendors. Thanks for watching.
NFV SDN Reality Check with Dan Meyer is a production of RCR TV. To suggest show topics or to reach Dan, you can find him on email, dmeyer@rcrwireless.com, and on Twitter @Meyer_Dan. For more Dan, news on NFV SDN and everything wireless, find your way over to rcrwireless.com.